Okay, good evening and welcome to today's class for West African Primaries exam, which is coming up on the 8th of October 2020. So the pattern of this live stream or the pattern of this classroom is that we talk about past questions and use it as a basis to talk about the topic of focus. So I'll be posting some questions within the chat, and then I'll also be reading them out, and I'll be expecting your answers within the chat so that we can collaborate and talk about them together. I'm retrieving the questions. Is also complaining. Anyway, let me retrieve the questions, and then all these issues should have been sorted out before the class, not during the class. Okay, here we go. The first question here. Okay, we stopped at yesterday we talked about Graves' disease, then we talked about pathways of coagulation, then we talked about biological barriers, then we also talked about mechanism of action of zidovudine. So let me post the first question for today. Okay, so this is the first question for today. I think someone joined us. Let me see, who is that? So the first question for today says, which of these is not a biological barrier? Okay, still keeping in touch with what is your full name? Faka for you. Okay. That should be Akel Shola. Please always use your common name so that we can identify you. That's Akel Shola, right? That's your email address. Okay, so you just click on, you guys, I looked at the interface on the mobile app. It looks better when you it's easier for you to navigate if you put your screen, if you put your phone in landscape. Just try it out. You'll see that it's actually easier for you, like in the classroom. Put your phone in landscape position instead of just keeping it straight vertically. Keep it landscape, like turn it sideways. That's if your auto rotation is on. Put it sideways, then you can easily click. You will see the buttons will now become bigger, and then you can easily locate the button for chat, which is at the left lower corner. Click on it. You will see the question I dropped there. Then attempt to answer the question. For those just joining us, we are also live streaming Okay, we are live. Anyway, so I'm expecting answers. Which of these is not a biological barrier, but what do you call it? Blood-brain barrier, cell membrane, placenta, renal tubules, and capillary walls. So which of these is not a biological barrier? Alex Amas said is nota. Okay, Temitope said the answer is D. Okay, yeah, you are correct. The answer is D. The others are biological barriers, but renal tubules is not a biological barrier per se. So we'll proceed. Let me put the next question. So this one says, which of these are true? A, resistance to macro light. Erythromycin is bacteriostatic, acting in 30S subunit. Digoxin level may decrease when administered with erythromycin. Cholestatic jaundice may start more than 1 week, both CNS and placenta wall. So you can also read the questions by yourself and attempt. So we are waiting your answers. If we are quiet, it's kind of silent for the person who is going to watch. So I'll need you to be more active so that we can proceed from there. No attempts yet. First option says resistance to macrolide is usually plasmid mediated. Remember, you are looking for the true option. Then the second one said erythromycin is bacteriostatic, acting in 30S ribosomal subunit. Okay. First of all, if you know about erythromycin, remember erythromycin is a protein synthesis inhibitor. So usually protein synthesis inhibitors are divided into the ones that act on 50S ribosomal subunits and the ones that act on 30S ribosomal subunits. Like if you've used my app, you'll find out that the code I gave there is MC50 and AT30. So MC50 is macrolides and chloramphenicol. They act on 50S ribosomal subunits, whereas aminoglycosides and tetracycline act on 30S ribosomal subunit. So that tells you that this answer is obviously false. Let me even leave the resistance one first. Then the dioxin level may decrease when administered with erythromycin. If you know drug-drug interactions, this one requires some knowledge of drug-drug interactions, but the option is false. Then cholestatic jaundice may start more than 1 week after commencement of erythromycin. Okay, so that is the answer. It's actually true. Cholestatic jaundice is a side effect of erythromycin. Then erythromycin penetrates both CNS and placental wall. There's something about it. I think it only penetrates the placenta. It doesn't do well with CNS penetration. So most times, and macrolides like erythromycin, azithromycin, clarithromycin, they've been found to be helpful for atypical organisms. That's when you talk about what do you call it? You talk about chlamydia, mycoplasma, legionella, all these atypical organisms. So when you are treating pneumonia and you're expecting atypical organisms, you can actually use macrolides. That's why, like, if you worked in the hospitals, now that there's coronavirus pandemic, you find out that we use a lot of azithromycin because it's a macrolide and it's used for atypical organisms. So that's the principle behind that. So I'll move on to the next question. So obviously the one resistance to macrolide is usually plasmid mediated is obviously false because the answer is cholestatic jaundice. But this question is a little bit intrinsic. That's the kind of questions that West Africa can ask you sometimes because they try to touch a lot of things that you may not really notice when you are reading. But the way you saw this one now, it takes you all you have to do is to go back and read macrolides, read erythromycin specifically, and then find out mechanism of action, everything about it, the subunits, and I've already given you some framework and the backbone for you to do more little work on it and to stick. Then the next question is anatomy. For West Africa, they ask questions, sha. They can ask very, very intrinsic questions that if you do not read that stuff, you will not know it. And most times they have their own lecture notes. So unlike national where the strategy could just be okay, the outline. Sometimes you actually have to look at their own lecture notes because the things that they will ask you, the way they will ask it will tell you that this is the way they talked about it. So they're just fourth ventricle, it's kind of, except you've actually read the brain very well and you've read the floor of the fourth ventricle. I promise you, these questions are very, very interesting. And you've actually coded it and noted all the parts of the fourth ventricle. Anyway, the answer is A. The answer is A. So it's an except question. And always remember, when a question is an except question, it implies that you pick the one that is not true. And there's how West Africa asks their question. I think I should use this opportunity to mention it to you guys. Where they're supposed to figure out that there's supposed to be an except, or it's kind of like what you do in West Africa exam is to choose the odd man out. So they may not put an except. They may not put something that will tell you that this thing is supposed to be an except question. But when you look at the options, if you know the answer, you know that this one sticks out. It's obviously odd. So I think their questions should be more of they pick the odd man out rather than so sometimes they can just ask you a question like this and there will be no except floor of the fourth ventricle. So it's left for you to now know which one is false among them or which one is true. Like if all of them are true and one is false, then that one is the answer. If all of them are false and one is true, then that one is the answer. So I think that's that about that. Then I'll quickly let me see, someone is attempting to join us. Each of the options, but let me okay. So the first option says the hypoglossal nucleus is it superior? Inferior to the vagal nucleus. And if it kind of makes sense. I think some of these things, like even if you did not read it, it may actually make sense to you. Like hypoglossal nerve, is it not nerve 12? Why vagal nerve is nerve 9? So it also makes sense that it should be medial to it. And if you know your embryology, I think nerve, is it which one and which one now comes from the medulla? So that's how it's divided anyway. Some of the cranial nerves come from the medulla, some come from the pons, some come from the midbrain. So if you hypoglossal nerve, not nerve 9, nerve 10, nerve 9 is glossopharyngeal nerve. So it should be lower, it should be inferior to the vagal nerve, the origin of the vagal nerve. The nucleus cannot be together, they will not be on the same place. So that's the answer, is A. Then stria medullaris contains auditory fiber, is very also true. It's part of the things that form the upper border. Then facial colliculus is formed by the facial nerve. you must read this thing for it to make sense. You must read it for it to make sense. So, but at the end of the lecture, just I think when you are taking this lecture, just have like a pen and paper, and you say, okay, I'm going to read this, I'm going to read that. So just not note somewhere that you are going to read about the floor of the fourth ventricle. Just simple like that. Just note the borders, because here they're obviously asking about the superior border, lateral border, medial border, the the relationship between each of the structures. So the next one is um, something about genetics. It's something about genetics. Okay. Okay. So which of these are false? A. Post-transcriptional modification occurs in the nucleolus. B. Ligation of exons is called exon splicing. C. Removal of non-coding sequence. Exon is a step. D. JAK-STAT mutation can cause malignancies. So which of the I'm awaiting your answers. You guys can ask. It makes it a bit tough for you guys. But I try to encourage my candidates to go for national. It's more straightforward. But it's all good. It can be done. Okay, so attempt the question. Okay, and once that you know that these guys are asking intrinsic question, but they will always put one that if you have some other basic knowledge, it will help you to pass the exam. So now they're talking about post-transcription. The nucleolus, what's the function of the nucleolus, first of all? You know, then what from RNA? Each of those processes occur in different places. DNA is for the DNA to come out and become RNA, that's in terms of messenger RNA, is to first of all transcribe, and then that messenger RNA is now moved You can't hear me? Why now? But Alex, you can hear me. Alex, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Alex? Okay, he said he can hear me. So tell me, can you hear me now? It has to be from your own end. Try and increase your volume and see. Okay, so I'll write on here. So yeah, so from the nucleus to the mRNA is now transferred. mRNA is now transferred from the nucleus down to where now the rough endoplasmic reticulum, because that's where protein synthesis occurs, right? So obviously, after transcription, there is something called post-transcriptional modification. It doesn't occur in the nucleolus. I can't remember what the nucleolus does. What does the nucleolus do again among the cells? Let me look for it. So the nucleolus of the organelles in the cell that is involved. Sometimes people mistake it for the nucleus, but it's not the same thing. So the primary function is ribosomal RNA synthesis and ribosome biogenesis. So it sounds like something that could be involved in RNA synthesis and post-transcriptional modification. So I think we have to specifically look for, okay, it functions to assemble the ribosome. Is nucleolus is the largest structure in the nucleus of eukaryote, inside the nucleus, okay, and it packages the ribosomes, which is involved in protein synthesis. So it's a site of ribosome biogenesis. There's nothing much about it. But if you talk about post-transcriptional modification, let's see where it occurs. So if you have that's to thymine, so with two hydrogen bonds, so if you have something like that, then you have GC. So if you have guanine binding to cytosine, so when those two combine, it will now give you the base pairs. So what happens is that the if the DNA, for example, is TC, that means the mRNA will be AG. So that's like the opposite of it. It's just like two parallel lines, but they have to be paired in the formula which they normally use. Guanine and cytosine bind with three hydrogen bonds. Why? Adenine and thymine bind with only one hydrogen bond. And remember that so it was from your end, Demi. Maybe something happened with your network or something that was making you not able to hear. So glad you are hearing us now. So let's proceed. So because of that, that mRNA, out of all the mRNA, is not all of it that will eventually be needed for protein synthesis. Some of it are senseless, nonsense. They say that the DNA code is degenerate. That's to say that it's it can have so many codes that is coding for the same protein. So it means that some of the codes that may be written by the mRNA that the mRNA carry may not be coding for any reasonable protein, like in a combination. So the body is trying to remove some of those wasted codes, and so that's why it's called gene splicing. It will now cut it. Just as if when you're editing a video, you cut from one end and then join the part that you remove the part that you removed and then join the other two ends. So that's what exon splicing is about. I believe that in the future we're going to have my laptop to do this. We'll have screen sharing so that you'll be able to see what I'm talking about and appreciate it better. So we have F4 back. So JAK-STAT mutation can cause malignancies. That's very, very true. If you know about JAK-STAT mechanism and mutation, there is this thing about mutation, whether it's gain of function or loss of function. So each of them have implications. So obviously JAK-STAT is involved in signaling, cell signaling. So obviously any mutation that has to do with cell signaling would cause a malignancy because cells require that signaling to tell them to stop growing or to tell them to do whatever it is that the cell needs to do. Maybe it requires signaling, maybe to even tell it to consider apoptosis, because apoptosis is just a form of control for the cell. So if the cell is having maybe a genetic mutation that it cannot repair, it now goes into apoptosis. That's programmed cell death to try to repair itself. But if for any reason it could not repair, it could repair itself, fine, it will continue. But if it cannot repair itself, it's supposed to go into apoptosis through cell signaling, which JAK-STAT is involved in. But if JAK-STAT is mutated, it means that signaling that will say, okay, I have some bad genes that this cell should not continue, should just commit suicide and pack. But if that JAK-STAT is not available, the cell will now become immortal. To become immortal in the sense that the normal apoptosis does no longer exist. So the cell will continue to grow, continue to multiply. That's when malignancy occurs because obviously they will continue to grow, they will continue to spread to exogenous organs and even via hematogenous spread to other organs where they were not previously present. That's what you call metastasis, right? So I think with that, so you're welcome, Fakar, for you. You're welcome. Good evening. So I think with that, we've answered that question. Let's pick another one. We've streamed for over 40 minutes now. Though the stream started counting from when Temitope was in class alone. The next question is talking about um, one of mineral, which is a common MC, a source of common MC questions. Screen, if you turn your phone in the landscape mode, you actually enjoy the so that you can easily see the buttons and appreciate it better. The buttons will become bigger and you can easily locate it and click. Okay, Faka, you're answering the one that will. Okay, final answer. You guys are correct. Is A. Is A. Is A. For that that question about post transcription. Sure. Clinical features of iron deficiency. A. Increased menstrual loss. B. And D. Repeated mild infection of upper respiratory tract. E. Moderate splenomegaly. So the question is just saying which of the following is a clinical feature of iron deficiency. Of a new candidate, but yeah, you're still answering the old ones. Where are you seeing your questions from? Did I ask anything about the fourth bench? Okay, the fourth bench. The answer is A. Yeah, you are right. Anyway, just come down, scroll down, and join the class because we are in clinical features of iron deficiency. That's the last question on the chat box. Maybe later you can scroll up. So you guys are correct. B is the answer. Angular stomatitis. Glossiness of the tongue, they make it sound very familiar, but is beefy red tongue. Abi? Is beefy red tongue. Then there's angular stomatitis or angular cheilitis. Then other features of iron deficiency include spoon-shaped nail called koilonychia. Then you have um what's that Weber something esophageal webs. Esophageal webs. Plumavincin Patterson-Kelly syndrome. Yeah, that's the name of the syndrome. Plumavincin Patterson-Kelly syndrome, also known as esophageal webs. So menstrual increase in menstrual loss can actually be a cause of iron deficiency. Then repeated mild infection is a cause of iron deficiency rather than a clinical feature. Splenomegaly itself. So yeah, Plumavincin Patterson-Kelly syndrome. Plumavincin Patterson-Kelly. Okay. So I think with that, let me go to the next question. Then some of the things you need to know about iron deficiency syndrome, iron deficiency anemia, is that one is the commonest cause of um, one is the commonest cause of um, is the commonest cause of anemia worldwide. That's a common question that they ask. Which of the following is the commonest cause of anemia? Iron deficiency is the commonest cause of anemia worldwide. Then it is also related to hookworm infestation. In national question, they will ask you about hookworm infestation. A farmer, something about a farmer that worm penetrates the skin. Hookworm, the point of entry is by penetration. That's the disease area. The hookworm will just penetrate, and when hookworm penetrates, where is it going to? Microbleeds, which we call occult blood loss. So it causes anemia of chronic, causes a kind of a chronic blood loss, which will lead to iron deficiency anemia. So that's that. Um, we tend to have lower PCV than males. It's not just because of menses anyway. I think males have a higher concentration of erythropoietin in their blood. Anyway, I'm just the way I give you these lectures, I try to open your mind treated by topics. From one topic you can talk about other things. Um, is a physiology question, and it's exploring the heart, specifically the heart sounds. So you should be able to give me the heart sounds. How many heart sounds do we have? Some people may have 10, but for me, I have just 4. Well, I don't have 4 anyway, but humans can have 4. 2 are found in pathology, 2 are found in normal people. Anyway, let's proceed. So concerning heart sounds, A, first heart sound is due to closure of mitral and tricuspid valves. B, P2 is widely split and fixed in ASD. C, first heart sound is loud in mitral stenosis. D, second heart sound is absent in systemic hypertension. E, second heart sound is widely split in complete right bundle branch block. Okay, attempt the question so that we can proceed. More answers? More answers? Where is Pakao? I'm not seeing your contribution based on where we are, not based on where you are. Okay, you chose the B option. Okay, say B2 is widely split and fixed in ASD. Temitope chose the first option, which says that first heart sound is due to closure of mitral and tricuspid valves. This question, I left, you know, if you are here when I explained that you may need an except and they will not put it. So if you don't know that all the options one, so Alex Ame is correct. You're looking for the odd man out. That second heart sound is absent in systemic hypertension. That doesn't even sound how second heart sound, which is the part of loud A2 in systemic hypertension. Just like there's loud P2 in pulmonary hypertension. So let me just give you a breakdown. First of all, there's the first heart sound, which involves the closure of the mitral valves. That's the inlet valves, right? Valves in the inside of the heart. So mitral valve connects the left side of the heart, the left atrium to the left ventricle, while the tricuspid valve. Then the what do you call them? The outlet valves. So that's where you have the aortic valve and the pulmonary valve. Aortic valve being on the left side and pulmonary valve being on the right side. And if you know the anatomy of the heart, you will realize that aortic valve being on the left side, it pumps blood forward and upwards, where you now have the arc of the aorta, which from there gives branch to the carotid, gives branch to the brachiocephalic, the one that will connect the hands and the upper limbs, then gives branches to other things too. Then eventually it will come down. You now have descending aorta, thoracic aorta, keeps going down. You now have part of descending aorta is abdominal aorta, which eventually ends as bifurcation as two iliac arteries, which keeps subdividing until it gets to femoral artery that goes down to the legs. So what I'm trying to paint for you is that left side of the heart is what pumps blood to the whole right ventricle pumps, and then blood enters through the pulmonary valve into the pulmonary vein, right? Because this is where some people get confused. So pulmonary vein is pulmonary artery. Is the one that is supplying the lungs. But one thing about pulmonary artery is that it's carrying deoxygenated blood. All arteries carry oxygenated blood but except pulmonary artery, which returns via pulmonary veins into the left side of the heart to be pumped to the whole system. So that's essentially that about that. Let me come back to the heart sound. So the third heart sound is, even though they didn't talk about it here, but it's important to us to highlight it. The third heart sound has to do with rapid ventricular filling. So that's so whenever blood is filling ventricles very rapidly, you are going to hear a third heart failure. You can also find it in hyperdynamic states. So higher output states like thyrotoxicosis, beriberi, which other thing? Because fever, anemia, all these things are so. Anemic heart failure is a kind of hyperdynamic or higher. So all these things can give. Then S4 that it can be normal and true.